this one I thought, okay, so it'll probably go and we click that. All right, there we go. So again, my name is DeLonne and I'm coming to you live from Multi-Fusion Studios at Optimus Park here in Tempe. First and foremost, man, go D-backs. We just lost game one yesterday. Game two is today. It's in a couple of hours. So I really want to try to cover some things and then kind of just to give you a brief idea, understanding of what it is the overall mission. What is it that we're exactly trying to accomplish? See, the thing is that I understand now as a black man, having lived in this country for my entire life, 40 years, and I've been up, I've been down, I've been in literally, and I've been out literally. And I've seen the system from a lot of different sides. I've started getting locked up when I was 12. And so starting at 12, and then the last stint, I was at 38 when I got out. So you're talking about a span of 26 years that had passed. And of those 26 years, I spent 15 incarcerated. I really started doing time around when I turned 14. That's when I really started doing time, hard time, like a go away for a year time. And I can't say that I did probation. I had a counselor. They tried the counseling with me. You know what I mean? I was never a dummy. I was always pretty savvy. I just was green to a lot of the stuff. And so for me, getting my early introduction into being locked up and being involved in the system, especially at 12, that's when the mind is beginning to shape itself formidably. And so without any real positive male influences in my life, you start to see that people from the streets, man, they get more respect. You go to jail, you start getting locked up. Like, the tougher you are, the more stuff that you've done, whether it be the more people that you've hurt, or whether it be the more drugs that you sold, or the more money that you stole, right? That was how you got respect. And it was a different kind of respect. It was a power respect more than anything, because you will realize that these guys can get and do pretty much anything that they want. We talking about kids. I started as a kid, but that's how I was being shaped. And so that's what was more attractive to me. That was what the allure to the streets was, is that, man, how can I get that kind of power and that kind of control over other people? And from then on, it was like, I'm trying to now gain experience. I liken it to when you get a job, when you're young and you get a job and you're trying to move up through the corporation. You say, man, one day I want to run this thing. And so you're learning as much as you can about every single department and every single division. And you're just trying to accumulate as much knowledge as you can. It's going to help you in this journey to get there. So that's why I say that it was never any real surprise when at 14, like, oh, I'm starting to do hard time. And I'm going to spare all of the details today of how I ended up doing a year and then getting out and doing 9 months and then getting out and then getting sentenced to 6.5 years. And now I'm about to go really see what it's about. I'll spare all of those details, but I say all that to say that that gave me the opportunity to really see the system from a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different angles. I've been as high as SMU. I've been in low as Eagle Point and 2 Yard. I've never been in protective custody, but I've been in every supermax, every max, every closed custody, almost every detention. Every yard I've been in a detention. And it's not because I was just overwhelmingly gangster, but again, I'm trying to accumulate the knowledge. And so part of the learning experience is you have to do it. You know, you can't just, I learned very early, you can't be the guy that just talks and never did it, because then no one's going to believe you. So even if you never do it to the degree in which you brag about it, you got to have at least done it. You can't talk about, man, I sold keys and you never seen an ounce. So I learned very early that if I'm going to be talking this high power shit, nigga, I need to be getting some experience, some real experience. And it can't just be music, you know, because that's the problem with a lot of these kids in this generation. Their only real exposure to it is music. They don't live in these environments where it's like that, where you have to. Granted, they may not necessarily be wealthy. They may not necessarily live in the rich part of town, but it ain't to where it's in some parts of the country or in some parts of town. It is cutthroat. It is kill or be killed. And it is you got to get out here and hustle and survive. And you got to be a lion. People are always trying to come for you. Well, you don't have a choice. You're going to have to pick a side. Most of these kids don't grow up in that. But the neighborhood that I live in, none of them kids, it's not like that there. but they all profess this, that, and the third. I liken it to Deion Sanders' son right now, or no, Michael Irvin's son right now, talking about, yeah, man, I'm a gangster, I'm a killer, I saw weight, this, that, and the third. And Michael Irvin coming out saying, bro, you grew up in a gated community. And not the kind of gated community you trying to go to. I grew up in a gated community too, but it was a different kind of gate, right? And so these kids nowadays, their only real exposure to that oftentimes is just through music. But it's still fostering a mentality that you feel like I have to be this. And now you feel like in order for me to, like, this is how I'm going to get the respect. Like, we've made it more fashionable for people to respect. And I've been there before, so I'm going to say low lives. When you out here and you in the streets and you involved in the street code and the street code of conduct, and it's kill or be killed, and you out here killing people and gangbanging and selling drugs and robbing people and shit, that's a low life society. And I was a low life for most of my life, and I'm still trying to come out of that. Some people would tell you, but not to the degree that I once was involved in all of this kind of stuff, right? But so how do you shift that mindset? That you go from respecting these kind of people and letting these be your role models and letting this be kind of like your training platform, how you're growing into a man or to a woman based on what you hear, mostly what you hear and some of what you see. Because that's the problem is that it's mostly what we hear. Stories are what sell. Facts are just what tell. And so when you're reading the facts and the figures, that's cool. But when you're hearing these stories, these persuasive stories that pull at your emotions, and then you start to have these emotional experiences outwardly, yeah, for sure, that can have a stronger influence on you. And the younger and younger in which these kids are having that experience, the much more likely it is they're going to be funneled right into this system, right? This education to prison pipeline, they say. I'm going to talk a lot about prisons, and because that's been so much of my experience in life, unfortunately. But I just want to say that you got to hear the whole story first before you start to judge the content of what I'm about to say. And so the first thing is that just imagine if in 3 generations, which is 60 years, we had no prisons. Let you sit on that for 1 second. Now remember what I said. Here, listen to the whole thing first. But imagine that we lived in a society in which prisons did not exist. I don't blame prison for me becoming the man that I am. I'm grateful for that experience. It taught me a lot about what I'm actually capable of. But I can tell you that prisons is not the answer. It's not. It's just like when you whoop your kid. It's not the answer. You know how many whoopings I got when I was a kid? I got a grip. You know how many times I've been to jail and been to prison? A grip. That's not the answer. In fact, I'd go as far to say that it's part of the problem. Again, before you judge this, you have to just hear the whole thing. Just hear me all the way out. I would venture to say that that's part of the problem. And a significant part of the problem, and here's why, is that as a 40-year-old man now raising a 13-year-old son, I grew up without a father. So tell me, how is I supposed to raise a guy who spent all of this time in prison? How am I supposed to raise a young man to be a man? When everything I learned about being a man led me to do all this time in prison. I learned how to be a man from convicts, from con artists, from drug dealers, from pimps, from all different types of hustlers and macs and crackheads and everything in between and above and around and beyond. These are the kind of men that I learned from. I can't say that I never had a positive example of what a man was supposed to be, but not enough to get the principles to learn how to live life. Like my Uncle Howard was very successful, but we would spend maybe a couple of days a year around this man. So there's not a great deal that you can grasp or you can capture. You can look around and you can be captivated by some of the different bells and whistles and things that you see, but it's not enough to really shape you in a way that says, this is how I'm supposed to be. These are the characteristics and the attributes that I'm supposed to possess. This is the mannerism in which I'm supposed to walk. This is the way I'm supposed to shave, all of those different things. This is what we're talking about here. And so when you take a young male and you put him in this environment around people who are already criminals, hardened criminals, some of the best, and some of them are very intelligent. If not for nothing else, most of them are very persuasive. And this is where you want to put your most impressionable minds. And even more so, you're not just putting them there, but you're putting them there in an environment where you're almost making it as if you got to kill or be killed in order to survive. You allow this environment to exist because there is no real treatment of the problem. The problem is the perspective. It's the way that you see things. It's the way that you see the world. More importantly, it's the way that you see yourself. See, if I had a better perspective of myself as a man and I knew what it meant to be a man, I would have understood a long time ago. Now, this ain't the way. This ain't the way. This is counterintuitive. If you knew better, you'd do better. And that's the problem is that these examples that we have that are shaping and molding so many men and women in our society is flawed. If this is the perspective and this is the mentality that we're building into our people, it's wrong. And it's up, and even though you say in a society of 330 million people, there's 2+ million people incarcerated. We ain't gonna count the people that are just got out. That currently, at any given point in time, it's over 2 million people in America locked up. And I don't know how many more on probation and parole who used to be on probation or parole, or how many people have been to jail or prison. I'd be curious to see what is the total population of people in our society that have been to jail and or prison. It's significant. And they wonder why we have the problems that we have. And it's not just our society, but our society has the biggest problem. We're not the biggest country, but we have the biggest prison population. And that's crazy when you think about countries like Russia, China. I'm not knocking these countries, but I understand that their political policies are different than ours. Ours are free, right? We're freedom. We're free. We're free to do whatever we want. And some of these other countries, you're not free to express your opinions, right? Like I'm expressing an opinion about an institution. You're not necessarily free to do that in other countries, right? And some people will say free. But what I'd say is that when you begin to treat the problem, so coming back to this, no prisons in 60 years. That means in 60 years, 3 generations of children. Pick a start date and we say this generation, and then the children that they have, the second generation, and then the children that they have, that's the 3rd generation. By the time that 3rd generation is ready to start having kids, there are no more prisons. So there's not even a reason for them to tell their son or their daughter, if you keep messing up, you're going to end up in prison. Because that's what we say in our communities. You keep messing around, you're going to end up in prison. They're going to lock your ass up. Is it any wonder that we get locked up then? You put that energy out there, right? Zig Ziglar says, that I don't know how factual this is, but I would venture to say it's relatively factual because I've never encountered this, and I live in Arizona, a place with a very high indigenous or Native American population. And he says that they did a study that on the Navajo Nation, they couldn't find one person that stuttered. And the best rationale they came up with is that they don't even have a word for stutter. So how can you do something you don't even know exists? So just imagine if in 3 generations there were no more prisons. We had found a way to eradicate prisons. Now, the thing is that before we start talking about we need prisons and people are evil and yada, 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 and this, that, and the third, we're not talking about the plan yet. We're not talking about what this is going to cost yet. We're not talking about how preposterous that is, right? We don't always have to go right to the negative. The first thing we're going to do is let's just visualize what that looks like. Right? Let's just take a second and close our eyes and think about, if there was no prisons in 60 years, what kind of society would we live in? Now, before you do close your eyes and you visualize that, some people already saw, people killing each other. Da, da, da. Einstein says, and I'm paraphrasing this, he says that one of the biggest questions that you have to ask yourself is this: what type of universe do I live in? Do I live in a friendly universe or a hostile universe? And it just depends on your perspective. Do you live in a friendly universe or a hostile universe? So before I ask you to close your eyes and then visualize what a world with no prisons would look like, I want you to first close your eyes and visualize what did life look like when it was just the first human being? Just the first, right? Regardless of what religion you believe, even if you believe in the Big Bang, I don't care what you believe. It started with one. It could have just boom popped and then there was a bunch of embryos that just fertilized in the grass and then maybe a whole family of human beings grew up. I don't know how it looked, but just imagine the first human being. And imagine that first human being was you. And you're young. Now, here's the thing. Before you continue, actually, no, we'll go back to that. Just close your eyes. And envision now you're young and you're looking around the world and you see this vast array of wildlife. And whether you live in the desert or you live in the high country, you know what nature looks like. Everyone has had some form of experience with nature. So just imagine the most purest form of nature, because there is no other man trampling the earth. There are no buildings, there are no airplanes, there are no skyscrapers. It's just literally, it's just visualize you with the trees, and there might be a body of water that's just flowing by, and you have these, clouds in the sky, and you can hear birds and different animals, and all of this stuff is just harmoniously existing. And it's just you, and it's just peace, and it's just quiet, and it's just stillness. As far as the type of noise, we're not talking about the natural noise, the wind blowing through the trees and that slight whistle that you hear. We're not talking about the animals that are rummaging about, going about their day, handling their business. We're not talking about the sounds of the animals, but we're just talking about just actual peace and silence. Imagine what it smelled like. You just smell nothing but nature, nothing but greenery, nothing but trees, nothing but flowers and bushes. And you start to walk around and you start to move around. And now, what is your experience? What else are you seeing? What other components of nature? Maybe I'm from Arizona, so maybe you see mountains that are flowing with rivers with nice foresty trees growing out of the side. And you see maybe some cactuses or cacti, right? Whatever it is you see, you only see nature. That's it. You only see nature. There's nothing else exists. And you might maybe make it to the shoreline and you're on the sand and you look out into this beautiful water. It's nice and crystal clear. And you just see more wild marine life. And it's just existing. They're just swimming and flowing and they're just existing. And everybody is just in this synergistic movement of just existence. No one is hostile. You don't have to worry or be guarded from the other animals trying to attack you. It's just peace. Everybody's just going about their day. They're not worried about anything. Everybody just exists. What does that look like? What did it look like when there was just one human being? What was that experience like? There was no need to murder. There was no need to sell drugs. None of that stuff existed. Now, could you imagine from the very first human being to now there's a family? Now, remember, the very first human being, he didn't walk into a house at the end of the day and jump into bed and pull the covers over and cut the thermostat down so he could sleep cool. It was none of that. He slept outdoors in the elements. Now, from that human being to the next round that finally created shelter. And I ain't talking about a mansion. I'm just talking about maybe something as basic as a lean-to. How far apart are those generations? And now what about when you got not just a structure for one person, but you can now have a structure big enough to support 3 generations of people, grandmother, mother, daughter. How long did it take for the very first human being to the time that they came up with that structure, that you could have all these people under one roof? How long did that take? Now, I bet you the first person could never imagine that he would live in a house like one you live in today. And I don't care what kind of house it is, even if you got your own lean-to, You got a cardboard box linked up against a wall. How long did it take for that man to be able to see that? So, of course, when you start talking about something that right now is so prevalent in our society, America, prisons, something as crazy as prisons, right? It's another structure used to house, right? And protect and to create shelter. Protect from what and shelter over against what? As opposed to what? Is a different question. But we're talking about how long did it take to go from that thinking to this thinking? So, of course, it's hard to imagine a society where there are no prisons. But in order for there to be a society where there are no prisons, I'm not saying we got to start closing down prisons. Nah, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that imagine if we had a society where crime didn't exist. Imagine that. Imagine if there was a society in which crime did not exist. Nobody sold drugs because nobody did drugs. If nobody did drugs, who would the drug dealers sell drugs to? They wouldn't. They'd find a new profession, is what they would do. If drug dealing was not an option, see, the thing is that we forget how resourceful we are. Go back to the image of you being the very first human being, the only human being. You don't got on a hat, headphones, a microphone. You're not listening to a podcast or watching a video. All you're doing is you're just engulfed in nature and you're just experiencing life. So, of course, that doesn't even register to sell drugs. You don't even know what drugs are. If the second human being came along in tandem and they start cohabitating and chopping it up and all this good stuff, if the second human being comes along and says, hey, bro, you want to go get high? He going to be like, huh? What you talking about? Get high? Yeah, man, you want to go do some coke? You want to go smoke some weed? You want to go shoot a couple lines? What you think? He'd be like, what you talking about? What is this that you speak of? Whatever language they spoke, right? What is this that you speak of? I have no idea what you're talking about. So then we have to consider as a society that what does it take to get to that point? What do we have to do to get to that point? See, here's the thing, is that we live in a world right now where the most important things I'm going to tell you are creating bombs to kill people, planes, trains, and automobiles to get away from each other, curing cancer. We spend so much money on these things. Getting to the moon, right? Now we've perfected. Imagine the guy sitting alone in the world, looking up at the moon and the stars saying, man, I'd like to get there. I wonder what's over there. If this place is like this, I wonder what that place is like. That place is probably jumping. They probably got more people like me over there. Imagine the first person thinking that, to where we are today, to where if you got enough money, you can go out of space. How long did it take to get there? I ain't talking about taking away from that. We're always going to need to go to space. And we're always going to need the bombs to kill people and guns to kill people. We always going to need war, right? We ain't saying that we got to stop thinking about that. But let's just consider that if we were to have a society that crime didn't exist, isn't it worth at least investing a little bit of time and energy and money into that? We spend so much money on trying to cure cancer. I ain't gonna talk. Cancer is evil. I hate cancer. Cancer has affected my family. But what is it that we're trying to cure, right? We're not saying stop trying to cure cancer. But all we're trying to say is, how about we invest in curing crime? How about we invest in curing substance abuse? I ain't talking about just start closing prisons right away. I'm not talking about no longer having drugs, getting rid of all the drugs. That's not what we're talking about here. You can't get rid of something. It's there. It's there. But if people stop going to prison, Well, then you have to close prisons. Prisons will eventually on their own be forced to go away. If people stop committing crime, what are you going to do? I ain't saying you got to stop being tough on crime. I'm not saying you got to stop locking people up. I have an argument about that, but this is not the platform for that today. What I'm saying is that if it came a point to where people just had a conscious moment within themselves and said, man, you know what? I am better than that. That was very low life of me. I am much more intelligent and resourceful than I thought I was. See, we ain't talking about getting rid of the drugs, just burning up all the weed. Every time you see some weed, you burn it up. You go out here and you burn up all the empty space that people was growing weed, and you burn down the houses where people was growing weed, and you eradicate all the fentanyl, right? I ain't talking about that. But imagine if people just woke up one day and was like, you know what, man? I don't need drugs. I'm high off life. And so on and so forth. That's how you get to no prisons in 60 years. So isn't that worth the investment? See, we got some of the most brilliant and intelligent minds on the planet that are teaching us how to get from Earth to the moon or to Mars. They are sending stuff to Mars. Keep them intelligent people doing that. We need that. We need it, right? We spend enough money on it, right? I think we need it. That shows that it's important. We spend our money on what's important, right? Don't we? Ain't that what we do as a country? What's in the best interest of its citizens? So I'm not saying to stop trying to send us to the moon. I'm not saying to stop trying to come up with a way to blow up an entire country in one bomb. I ain't saying that. We're going to need to do that. There's war going on everywhere right now. Israel and the Palestinians and Ukraine and Russia and all these other wars that are being fought in all these different places. Listen, we'll never be able to trust another human being, right? That's what we believe. We're always going to need to protect ourselves. I ain't saying stop investing money in that. I'm not saying just take the brilliant minds that are creating wars and figuring out how to start more wars and win these wars, right? Let's keep the smart, intelligent people where they at. We ain't talking about the brilliant scientists and researchers and the brilliant doctors that are involved in cancer research. I ain't talking about taking those brilliant people away from that work. I'm not even saying we need to stop donating to cancer research. That's not what I'm saying at all. Just keep spending money. They need it. It's important. Cancer continues to affect people's lives every single day, right? Come on, man. This is not what we're talking about here. But what if you could have a, because we all of these things are created to think about a what if. What if we could finally win the war and then there was no more wars? That's why we fight wars, right? We fight cancer so that we can end cancer. So cancer is no more. That's why we fight cancer. And so on and so forth, right? I'm not saying you got to stop doing that, but you invest in it because you believe that if we get to the end, we'll win. So what if the goal was to have a society in which crime did not happen? And you don't have to think, you don't just allow yourself for just a second to just unattach yourself from your body, because a lot of people, it's hard for them to even imagine that. A society in which crime doesn't exist, a society in which people don't hurt each other. It's impossible for some people to be able to fathom that. It's so crazy. And so just imagine it. What's wrong with imagining it? What's wrong with thinking about how about if we had a society in which people only loved each other? Isn't that a goal worth investing in? I'm not asking you to donate to me. I got the shirt on that says love, legacy. I'll tell you what the whole legacy thing means. Shout out to the Growth Spot TGS. But what I'm saying is that just imagine if we're not saying we're ever going to get there. Of course, we'll never get there. That's why we still need to go to Mars. And that's why we still need to kill people. It's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that isn't it at least worth thinking about a goal that great? Because what would our society look like? It'd be peaceful. We love each other. You could trust your neighbors. You would never have to worry about turning your back on something and then it not being there. You would never have to worry about your children being hurt by somebody else. I ain't saying whether or not we get there. What I'm saying is that isn't that a goal worth investing in? Because do you think we're ever going to cure cancer? Because every time one cancer goes away, another one pops up. It's like the flu. So we'll never cure cancer in a laboratory. But we keep investing in it because we believe that if we can get there, if we see it, if we can just keep going, we'll get there. And when we get there, then cancer won't exist. And I won't have to worry about losing my mother or my aunt or my cousin or my brother or myself, right? You have to think about that. So why isn't that a goal worth investing in, or at least a goal worth thinking about?